how can your businesses save our planet, and where the aim is to see how businesses in the private sector can decarbonize the sectors that they're working in. I'm Nish Ramatullah, a researcher at UCL Energy Institute, and I'm delighted to be your host today and moderator for this event. Working with businesses is something I'm deeply passionate about in my applied research here at UCL Energy Institute, having recently been involved in the Biden-launched initiative called the First Movers Coalition, just launched last week, where companies are coming together to make purchase commitments to decarbonize their part of the supply chain. So, example of that is how Amazon, for example, signed up to buy zero-emission services in the maritime sector by 2030, a bold initiative, an ambitious one. Another initiative that I'm involved in is the Cargo Owners for Zero-Emission Vessels, where again, companies like Amazon, Kia, Unilever are coming together to set bold, ambitious targets for the maritime supply chain, where they've decided to decarbonize their sector, the maritime supply chain by 2040 within their business operations. Again, an ambitious step and taking the timeline a bit further from the 2050 net zero commitments that have been released over the last 2 weeks. Before I pass on the mic to Miguel, I just wanted to make sure and let you know that you can ask questions through Slido. You'll see QR codes coming up on the screen, and we'll pick up those questions right towards the end in the panel discussion. Okay, Miguel, over to you.
Thank you very much. And again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Miguel Naranjo, and I work for the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as UN Climate Change. I'm joining you today from Glasgow, where we are holding our conference, as you know. So the title of this session is How Can Your Business Help Save the Planet? So I was asked to provide a general view from our point of view of how to answer that question. So maybe before even saying what you can do, let me tell you, you must do. You have no option. And I say that kindly. We are facing a situation where our society risks collapse. And as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development said a long time ago, business cannot succeed in a society that fails. So our society is dangerously coming dangerously close to failure. So really, we don't have option. Not only private sector, but the rest don't have an option. We have to act on climate. We have to act on sustainability in general. So that is the first message. It's not an optional thing. It's not something nice to do for future generations or the planet of the polar bears. It is something that we have to do if we want to be around as a society and if you want your business to be around in the near future. Now, having said that, what can you do? The first thing is establish a serious commitment to acting on climate. And again, I'm focusing here on climate, but we have 17 sustainable development goals. And that means we need to advance not only in addressing our greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to the changes in climate, but we also need to do that while ensuring that we meet all of the other sustainable development goals, right? And ending poverty, ensuring end of hunger, protecting life on water, on land, etc. So it's a big challenge, but all of it is interconnected. It's very important to make the adjustments that we need to make to climate change or to meet the challenge of climate change while not endangering the other SDGs, right? So the first thing that you can do is set that commitment from the top of your organization. Set a clear target to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions and to support adaptation to climate change. Second, assign the necessary resources, right? Assign responsibilities in your company. Establish policies and dedicate finance, right? Budget to that. A commitment without the support to make it happen, of course, is only greenwashing. Make the commitment, but also assign the necessary resources to make that commitment become a reality. Third, collaborate, and this is one of the key ones. No one can transform their business. We cannot transform the way that we do things as individuals even without collaboration. We are dependent on everybody else to transform this world to what we need to be. So work together with your suppliers, with your customers, all of your supply chain to try to transform the way your business is done to a climate-friendly one. So collaboration with your partners in business, collaboration with governments, and this means also for those of you that have the power for lobbying, engage in positive lobbying. It cannot be possible that you have companies making commitments on climate, but also supporting lobbying for governments to not take action on climate. So engage positively also with policymakers. And the last one is, and this is a little bit maybe surprising to say to some people, pay your fair share of taxes. We need, the governments need the adequate resources to be able to respond to this emergency, right? In order to put in place measures and to reduce emissions and to support our communities in adapting to the changes in climate, they will need resources. Developed countries have also promised significant resources to developing ones to also make this transition towards more climate-friendly society and prepare, adapt to the changes. They cannot do this if there is no resources, adequate resourcing to do it. So paying your fair share of taxes transparently is also key, and not only for climate, for many other things. So these are the high-level things that you can do as a business, and it doesn't matter if you're small or if you're big. These are things that you must do to really support the transition that we need towards climate neutral or net zero world. Last thing I will say, we don't have much time left. We have to halve emissions by 2030. Current targets are far off. Current pledges by governments put us at only 7% emission reduction by 2030. We need 50. So we have no more time left to waste. We really have to act on this seriously. And again, it's not just because it's nice, it's because it's about the future of your business too. So there is a clear business continuity rationality to do this. Good, and with that, I hand over to you, Nish.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for those really powerful words and opening remarks, and things that I could potentially elaborate on and really take things further and bring about some concrete evidence about the imperative of this, that it's no longer something far, it's something that will impact your bottom line, and the importance of company targets, really, the importance of collaboration, the importance of policy engagement, and taking action as if it was not yesterday that you should have really taken action. We are really losing time. We've got really limited carbon budgets. And action really needs to start taking place, both from the private and the policy side. So we've got the policy side now in the last 2 weeks, hopefully coming together to try and take some action. But really, this is all about private action and what private stakeholders within this ecosystem can take. And so just without further ado, I'll move on to the first panelist, who's John Nielsen from Sopra Steria. John Nielsen is the chief executive of the UK and Asia Sopra Steria, which is one of Europe's leading digital services and software development company, which you will see very shortly has made one of the most ambitious and bold commitments to date. When I was looking at it and comparing to the companies that I work with, I found that very ambitious and bold. To reach net zero in just 7 years from now, which is remarkable. It's a large company, 46,000 employees, over 30 countries. We'll have a short video introducing Sopra Steria, and then we'll move on to John Nielsen after that.
We all know that climate change is one of the greatest challenges humanity faces. Governments, companies, and society are all responsible for taking action now. This is why in September 2020, we committed to reaching net zero emissions as of 2028. It's highly ambitious, but I'm convinced that we will meet this commitment. Why? Because for almost 10 years, we have been taking action which is paying off.
Since 2014, our offices, data centers and business travel have been carbon neutral. We have also drastically improved our office's energy performance everywhere in the group, like in Norway with the Powerhouse building, which is energy positive, or in India, where we have installed solar panels or water recycling systems. And then, thanks to our employees' commitment and all the work done alongside our customer. For example, with the Commute project, which aims to reduce congestion traffic in the Toulouse Airport zone, the largest industrial area in Europe.
Thanks to all these initiatives, we are recognized as a leader in combating climate change, in particular by the global organization CDP, which, for the fourth year running, recognizes our environment policy at the highest level. And today, I'm proud to announce that the group became a signatory to the UN Climate Neutral Now initiative, thus confirming our commitment to carbon neutrality. As such, Sopra Steria is actively contributing to the Paris Agreement. Our objectives in terms of greenhouse gases emissions are aligned with mitigation pathways limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. But we are going even further with our net zero emissions commitment by 2028.
How can we achieve these objectives? By significantly reducing greenhouse gas emissions linked to our activity and by offsetting them when they cannot be avoided through carbon capture projects and afforestation in particular.
I would like to thank all group employees as well as all other stakeholders for the work they do every day towards achieving net zero emissions. I have full confidence in our ability to tackle these challenges all together.
Great. That was a good introduction to Sopra Steria and their commitments. And I'd just like to ask John Nielsen a few questions around how you've come around with this commitment. Like, how does this impact your cost base, for example, and how do you justify the spend during this really difficult period that we are faced with right now?
So I think this is an investment that is essential, and I think all companies need to face up to this. As Miguel was saying earlier, this isn't really an optional exercise. Sopra Steria actually commenced its work, myself and Siva Naranjan, who'll be a later speaker today, commenced our activities in 2008, and we've been working towards this time. As it happens, actually, a lot of the work that we do, which is addressing climate change, actually also gives us economic benefit as well. So it shouldn't be assumed it is an additional cost. But I think harnessing the collective power of the organisation behind something which really matters to the people that work for us actually gives us a far greater boost to our business than anything else.
Great, thank you. And I think that confirms the positive feedback loop on the income stream. And so you're actually confirming that it does give you a competitive advantage with your peers within the sector that you operate in.
I absolutely believe that it does. And actually something else that's happened, this has really developed over the last year or so, and is something that we have fully embraced. It's an initiative introduced by the British government. So as part of the procurement process for their contracts, what they're now asking, they're evaluating not whether you're a company that says, well, we believe in sustainability matters, we believe in social value. What they're actually saying is, for every contract, how will you increase sustainability related through the work you're actually about to deliver? So this makes things very tangible. We believe actually we've got a really strong story that has developed over many years and can show across all of the spectrum of social value, including sustainability, that we have delivered contracts that really make a difference. So I think the competitive advantage comes from we're talking about actions. We're not talking about words, the normal sort of corporate blah blah that surrounds this sort of subject. Is what do you really do to make a difference?
Excellent. Thank you. That's really good to hear. And without further ado, I think I'll move on to the second panelist on this panel. That's Graham O'Connor from the FES. Graham is the Operations Director at the FES Group, which is UK's leading business services and facilities management company. And let's have a quick overview of FES Group and its commitments on sustainability. So we've got Graham O'Connell here. I found that video quite ambitious again, and I think I saw in there, especially Scope 3 emissions that you're trying to target. And I just wanted to know what were the key drivers in your strategy to try and tackle Scope 3 emissions as well, because that's something that businesses can very easily say, that's not my problem, I'll leave it to my suppliers to figure out.
Morning, Nish. Well, as many folks will know, legislation is a key driver within our building services and construction industry. But basically, FES is a long-standing employer over 50 odd years, decided to not simply react to legislation, but get on the front foot and drive forward with positive strategy. So the group board has really driven our strategy from the top with passion and recognition that we do our duty and contribute to a more sustainable future. So our carbon reduction strategy is now firmly embedded in our business model. When I say passionate, I mean it's driven from the top, and it's got to encourage all employees. And it's basically developed into a massive drive for the business.
Okay, and perhaps maybe helpful for the other companies and the audience. Can you tell us more about the journey and how, when you started, what was the journey like, and how you've got to where you've got to right now with the commitments?
Okay, so way back in 2010, and it followed up in 2014, FES embarked on accreditation for ISO 14001 and 50001. So really the base principles were set there in terms of map, measure and reduce, if you like. The big problem for us, or the big challenge for us, is our diverse operations within the building services industry. You can imagine from the early part of the life cycle in carbon, we buy, procure materials and products, we bring them to site, we assemble them, construct them, and effectively then they pass into use for the client. So really, it's a very diverse life cycle, and it's quite a challenge to basically map that. But one of the key things was really to move on to, it was fairly simple to map and measure our offices, our scope 1 and scope 2, and even some of the indirect scope 2 emissions, but really scope 3 was a big focus, and that did include our site field operations. Key questions, if you like, in terms of mapping the whole life cycle of carbon is what's in our direct control? So what can we change? What can we improve? And also, where can we influence? And that's a key thing in terms of upstream and downstream. In terms of our upstream, if you look at our supply chain, in terms of manufacturing, delivering, providing goods to our sites, to our business, and then after, once we complete, in terms of our clients. So it's a challenging life cycle for our business services business.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that challenge part a little bit more in terms of how you interact with your suppliers and trying to get the data. How's that been in terms of capturing the data to be able to report on that?
A real challenge. Let's be honest, there's a mixed bag out there in the industry. Even some of the larger companies haven't really, I'll not say signed up to it. Obviously through legislation they have to in terms of carbon reporting, but it's a mixed bag in terms of where we all fit together within this life cycle of the carbon. So really it's almost us telling our supply chain, this is where we sit, this is where we're responsible for, and we believe that this is what you're responsible for. Some are educated, they understand it, some don't, particularly smaller supply chain guys, if you like. And the key thing for us going forward in our forward strategy is exactly that, is to understand where we are and how we can interact together. And basically for us, in terms of we're going to continue to map and provide more detail on our carbon emissions, so life cycle, we're going to develop innovative energy and carbon solutions. We're going to expand the collaborative partnerships. Absolutely. One of the folks on today is Robertson Construction, who is a company, it's also based in Scotland, but is UK-wide operations. And there's a huge benefit of sharing best practice, particularly trying to reduce carbon emissions and push towards and push beyond carbon neutral. So yeah, it's a real challenge for supply chain and trying to get them to come to the table. And you'll see from a video that we're actually going to provide as much free support as possible for particularly the smaller supply chains to join the fight with us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something that I'm involved in a day-to-day basis, and I know how challenging the data acquisition can be from the supply chain, especially the sector that I work in around transport, whether you use real-world data, what sort of acceptance you have around assumptions, etc. Thank you very much. I think that alludes to a number of challenges that we can expect if we do have a really a strong and forward-looking strategy, things that can be surmountable. And moving to the third panelist, without further ado, it's Graham Hanna from Robertson Group. Graham Hanna, who is the head of sustainability at Robertson Group, which is UK's largest family-owned construction, infrastructure and support services business. Let's get a quick intro to Robertson's sustainability strategy in the short video.
At Robertson, our purpose is to assure a sustainable future. Last year, we launched our Responsible Business 2030 strategy, outlining our roadmap for the next decade. We have committed to our people, our partners, and our planet. We will enhance the lives of 10,000 people by creating work placements and job opportunities, and by supporting apprenticeships, upskilling, and new qualifications. We will create £1 billion of social value through spending with social enterprises, micro-businesses and SMEs, and enhancing lives by spending locally in the areas where our projects are. We will move beyond carbon neutral to become climate positive by maintaining our 2020 offsetting level, by delivering a biodiversity net gain through our projects, and by generating zero direct emissions from our sites, our offices, our factories, and our fleet. 12 months from the launch of our 2030 strategy, we are making good progress and continuing on our journey. So far, we have delivered against our targets. Enhanced the lives of 598 people, delivered almost £203 million of social value, reduced our emissions intensity by 18.4%. We're proud of the progress we've made. We've already moved beyond carbon neutral to become climate positive. And we're ready to do more. It's the Robertson way.
Thank you. And we've got Graham Hanna here from the sustainability team. Graham, I often come across this when we interact with the sustainability heads of certain companies. We often find that it's challenging for them to take that message up to the C level, to the CEO level, or some finance level. Can you maybe talk to us about the challenge, whether that is a challenge, and what challenge you face in there, and what's the role of leadership really in a company like yours?
Yeah, of course. Leadership's extremely important in this issue. We're one of the largest family-owned construction, infrastructure and support services businesses in the UK, but ultimately everything we do and that we're trying to do is about making progress safely towards a sustainable future for our people, our communities and our business. As the video touched on, our purpose is to assure a sustainable future, and that really sets the direction for everyone within the business. We have to have our senior team be as visible and as transparent as possible with our employees and our supply chain, and really highlight what we stand for and how we want to deliver things. Our Chief Executive, Elliot Robertson, sits on our internal Responsible Business Ambassadors Network, which we use to share new initiatives and best practice across the group. We have a number of our board directors sit on our Responsible Business Leadership team, and a range of mentor and reverse mentor relationships in place to help people develop. So we try to regularly kind of share information, be it through internal bulletins, videos like the one we just shared, working groups and internal networks, as well as mandatory training around sustainability for all Robertson employees. We're also just about to launch carbon literacy training for all of our employees. So there's a real drive and a focus to get the whole of Team Robertson on board.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So it's leadership as well as the whole company really coming on board on this subject.
Absolutely.
Right. And can you perhaps talk more about how you've collaborated with other companies in the sector that you operate in, and whether that's helpful? Has that slowed things down? Has that improved collaborating? I think Miguel touched on the role of collaboration. I'm assuming that it will be positive, but let's hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So collaboration's key in everything we do, particularly if we want to do things in a fair and an inclusive way. We need to do things together. As an example, we are founding members of a number of climate compacts or action groups for key cities like Edinburgh, Dundee and Yorkshire, where we're working with the local authority and a number of prominent businesses in those areas to help each city meet their net zero goals. At a project level, we recently completed the COP26 House, which is an embodied carbon exemplar project in Glasgow, which has had input, support and materials from a huge range of partners, which is a huge logistical challenge to get everybody working together, but the project has some really great outcomes, and we've actually bettered the REBA 2030 challenge target for embodied carbon by more than 20%, which is a really great achievement. And I think it kind of shows that the technology is here, the skill set is getting there, if not here already. And for the most part, the drive to net zero is here, and kind of partnerships and collaboration are absolutely key to delivering upon this, whether that's with customers, supply chain, local communities, and a range of stakeholders.
Thank you. I think you touched upon embodied carbon again, something that I could have a long conversation in this panel. But apart from Scope 3 emissions, embodied carbon seem to also be a challenge that we need to overcome. But just a reminder for the audience to keep using the Slido to keep asking your questions, and we'll hopefully pick them up right towards the end in the panel discussion. Next up, we've got Jonas Dendler from SAP. And Jonas is global head of sustainability, which is the market leader in enterprise application software. And a staggering 77% of all our financial transactions touch the SAP system. This short video will provide a quick overview of SAP, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the target setting, sustainability target setting at SAP.
Imagine a future with zero emissions, zero waste, and zero inequality. At SAP, we power the technology and innovation required to activate this bold vision into reality. We provide sustainable, intelligent enterprises with the solutions required to manage their green line to reduce their carbon footprint, to rethink business processes across the entire value chain, and to safeguard social responsibility across workforce, sourcing, and procurement. Join us in our commitment to chasing zero.
Quick overview of SAP. And when I was reading around SAP's sustainability strategy, I saw that it's targeted to be carbon neutral by 2023. And that's, I think, a record I've not seen before. Maybe, Jonas, you could tell us more about how you've got to that target.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. I started at SAP in 2009 as the Global Environmental Manager. And actually back then, we already had a carbon target that led into a significant reduction of our operation, while we were still growing significantly now the past 10, 20 years of our operation. So for us, it was actually addressing it very early and initiating the significant measures internally for Scope 1, Scope 2, and also the relevant Scope 3 emissions. So I would say that we started early. We now have it on our radar to go carbon neutral by 2023, but actually our even bigger challenge is beyond that. So when we assessed our own operations, we realized that even though we're a global player, but we're in the software industry. So our carbon footprint as a company is compared to others not that big. So our biggest challenge or our biggest impact that we can have as a company is actually in enabling our huge customer base and our partner ecosystem to become more sustainable.
Thank you. And I did see that you've created solutions to enable companies to track their carbon footprint as one example of what you were just mentioning. Can you tell us more about, has that been taken up? Do you see demand for that sort of product in your offering?
It's actually even more than just tracking the carbon emissions. So when you look at when you try to define a sustainable enterprise, you actually can see it that this is a company that has control and transparency about its own processes, about its core business processes. And at the same time also takes the responsibility across the full value chain so that they're accountable for their action across the full value chain. And SAP is perfectly positioned to basically serve or enable our customers, support them in exactly that. So as an ERP company, we already manage the core processes of thousands of customers today. We have industry expertise, but most importantly, I would say, is also our huge ecosystem and customer base that we now can leverage in order to create networks that collaborate across the value chain, exchange data, exchange information, so that we gain the necessary insight. So it's not only about carbon, it's also about energy, it's about all the other commodities, about waste also, and really try to close the loop and gain the transparency in your processes across the full value chain.
Yeah, man, and I can imagine carbon, obviously, GHG emission is just one environmental problem that you got to deal with. There are a number of environmental problems that very quickly become a large problem to fix from a company's perspective. Can you tell us more about how you as a company have come up with this really ambitious and bold strategy of being carbon neutral by 2023, what challenges you faced or what were the positive outcomes of that?
So it's basically our vision. Help the world run better and improve people's lives. So this is basically our vision that we have already set more than 10 years ago. And this is just the first step. So if we want to enable our customers, if we want to actually help them to be more sustainable, we also need to do our homework. And we are seen, or since many years, as a sustainability leader, not only on the carbon side, but also on social sustainability and economic sustainability, so that within the ICT sector, we have done our homework. But again, compared to the impact that we can have by enabling our customers, I would say that is clearly a much larger portion that we can have. And we start there with definitely helping them solving some regulatory challenges. There will be additional pressure on having more complex processes internally that you need to manage with system. Or last but not least, that will be kind of creating even new business models, sustainable business models that will remain much longer and help the companies also being in business. The approach that we face there is definitely also an industry approach. So you said carbon is just one topic. It really varies depending on the industry you're talking about, the different priorities they face. And therefore, we have this industry approach so that we really have different initiatives running in different industries.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Moving on to our fifth and final panelist here, we've got Derek Harris from SkyAurora. SkyAurora is an exciting company headquartered in Edinburgh, which designs, manufactures and deploys rockets to clear the way for small satellite manufacturers to look into access space. Derek, just maybe you could do a better introduction than me on SkyAurora. Since we didn't have a video, I'll give you a minute to talk about SkyAurora.
Well, thank you, Nish, and thank you for inviting me along today to talk. It's great to be here on the panel with the likes of both the Grahams and Miguel this morning. I think basically to give you an idea behind SkyAurora is there was a niche market or a hole in the market for small satellites going into orbit from Europe. And basically, Miguel said it earlier, the sustainability goals, out of those 17, I would say at least 13 of them will depend on the data that comes from these small satellites. So these will could be tracking anything from rise in tides, deforestation, heat maps for local councils, things like this. So there was that big gap in the market, but that was why we came about. And we're only about 4 or 5 years old, but that allowed us to do something special. When anyone thinks about space at the moment, they think about the big Cape Canaveral, things like this in America. Scotland and the UK are looking to do space, but they're looking to do it better. Using Scottish space, they're looking to try and put the environment, the climate, everything at the centre and the heart of what we're doing. So hopefully that gives a bit of overview on SkyAurora.
Thank you. And I can certainly relate to that, having used emissions data from satellites. So we used to track ship emissions using satellite data from Exact Earth. Okay, tell us about your challenges that you've faced in the past regards to sustainability.
Well, I think the biggest thing is when you look at it, you can see the rocket just over my left shoulder at the moment. And it's, how can you make a rocket green? How can you make it sustainable? Things like this. So there is an easy answer to that. It is near impossible. But what that means is you need to be intelligent. You need to look at what else can be done. So we took a look at the Scottish whisky sector and what they did a few years back when they did a review of everything. And because the space sector in Scotland is so young, we've done the same thing. So we've looked at our supply chains, everything like this, but what we've looked at is where our major emissions were coming from, or where our major carbon issues were coming from. So things like having engines produced. And then at this present moment, when we first started, the only places that could do that were the likes of Italy for 3D printing. And then you would have to have them transported to the UK, and then we would transport them somewhere else in the UK to have them machined. So to get around this, we then started to make our own 3D printer, which is bigger and better than what most is out there at the moment. This allowed us to sort of cancel out those steps there. But I think the biggest thing that I can say that SkyAurora has done is they've invested in something called EcoScene. And EcoScene is a type of fuel which basically would replace the RP1. And for those that don't know, RP1 is just a technical name for rocket fuel. So Ecosene is basically takes previously unrecyclable plastics. So your your polystyrenes, for example, that protect your television, or since most of us here are in Scotland, the kebab boxes that you see on a Friday night, the black wrap that goes around the farmers' hay bales and things to keep it dry during the winter. These things normally just get buried or incinerated and they don't have a second life. Well, this process allows us to use that, and for every 1,000 kilograms of the waste plastics, we get 650 kilograms of fuel that we can use towards launches.
Excellent. Okay, actually, I was going to ask you about fuels, and it's pleasing to see, well, not pleasing, just to see that there is some different solutions. I mean, I would have thought it would probably be hydrogen, or are you looking into hydrogen as a fuel?
Yes, certainly. Well, as I said, Ecosene is the one that we're looking at the moment, and we see that as a first step. Nothing is ever going to be a final step, because I think you've heard that from the rest of the panel, is the minute you believe you've got a final answer, you're just waiting for a new problem to appear. So for us, it's continuing to look forward. So at the moment, and for the foreseeable future just now, we will work with the Ecosene. But looking out there, you said it yourself, you've got hydrogen, we're seeing people do things with algae for biofuels and things like this. There's a lot of different markets there. And what we're looking forward to is working, and what we do at the moment is with some of the networks and the universities, we work with them to see what other fuels are viable and can be used for, sort of, whether it be for launch or whether it be our space tug when that's in space. But these are the things we need to help promote that, let the network know we are looking for this and see what we can do.
Great. So we talked about actions you're taking today. Can you tell us more about your future goals and objectives to accomplish those targets? So do you have a net zero target, or have you got similar sustainability goals to the previous companies that we had?
Yes, certainly. Well, at this time, we're just going through to get our ISO accreditation for our environmental management, and which will then give us the sort of, hopefully, the roadmap for the plan for when we can be carbon neutral, or as close to carbon neutral as possible for that purpose. But with that, a big part of what we're going to do is going to have to be the sort of looking at alternative manufacturing, things like this, to see what we can do. And what we're hopeful for is this won't only affect ourselves, but the sort of technology that we're pioneering will be able to spin out into other industries and have an effect there too.
Great. Thank you very much. Really exciting stuff happening. I think we're now due for a coffee break from... I think there's a video that's supposed to be coming for us to have a quick sip for a quick coffee.
Matthew Algie is a coffee roaster based in Glasgow here in Scotland. We were the first roastery in the world to achieve the Carbon Neutral International Standard, and we're also proud participants in the UN Climate Now initiative. We've worked with One Carbon World to measure, reduce and offset our carbon emissions for the last 3 years. This is alongside climate crisis adaptation projects with our farming partners in the Global South. In our 6-year sustainability plan, which looks at our impact from farm to cup, we committed to specific
I'm not sure about the others, but I don't think we have.
For example, on water usage, electricity and coffee waste, to name just a few. Each year, we review our progress against our targets and publish a detailed sustainability report. The report and our many case studies are published on a responsive digital platform and promoted across our social media channels. We're particularly pleased that our cafe customers proudly share our sustainability messaging through their own businesses, and in some cases, partner with us on bespoke initiatives with our farming partners. You're very welcome to follow our projects and read our report at matthewalgie.com.
Okay, and that takes us to the panel discussion session. Here we are open for questions from the audience. I'm going to try and see what questions we've had from the audience so far. Thank you very much for engaging with us all this time. The first question that I have from the discussion from the audience here is, how can I make sure the carbon neutrality scheme that I sign up for is legitimate? Are there several companies offering this service? And it's something that I can certainly relate to, having looked at what offerings there are in the financial service sector, where there are a number of initiatives that are popping up pretty much left, right, and center every single day. And it's difficult to differentiate between what is the real, genuine 1.5 degrees aligned initiative versus something that's probably close to greenwash. Anyone would like to try and attempt to answer that question from the panel?
I'll take that one, Nish. I think, well, that was the biggest issue when we first started, as I say. When we first looked about it, it was like, who can you go to, who can you trust for that? For ourselves, that was why we originally started with the international accreditation of the ISOs. But then we spoke to trusted partners such as Soprasteria and One Carbon World to find out their opinions. So I believe it's the collaboration there for that purpose. Speak to other companies that are doing it well, find out who they've worked with, and try and sort of get your introductions from those companies. That way you'll miss out on the charlatans and hopefully get that good start that you need.
Thank you. I think that was really helpful. Yeah, seeing what your peers are doing and collaborating should help in that.
I could add to that, Nish, something that we do at Soprasteria that I think is very important is that this is all about integrity and accountability. You need to really show that you're walking the talk here. So to ensure full transparency in what we're doing, we have everything that we're doing externally audited every year, and we're doing that to the ISAE 3000 standard. And I think really if people want to test credentials, I think that's a good way to ask that question. Have you been externally audited? Can you prove that what you're doing is really working towards the right objectives?
There's one more thing I could add to that, but I think it's also important is that you report on the progress so that you're not only come up with ambitious target way out in the future, but then really break it down into annual targets, and that you also show if you are on track and how you're actually approaching it.
Great. Thank you for those really helpful answers, and hopefully that answers the questioner's question. The next question we've got is for Ewan Reid. We haven't had an intro from you, Ewan. Maybe you could do a quick introduction about yourself and your company, and I'll go ahead with the question.
Thanks. So I work for a coffee roasting company based in Glasgow called Matthew Algie. We have been involved in sustainable coffee sourcing really since the mid-90s, and our carbon journey started in the early 2000s. I think we do try and take a holistic approach to sustainability because we know the drivers for deforestation in the global south are based around economic inequalities. The drivers for child labour in the global south are based on economic inequalities. So it's certainly incumbent on us, because we're sourcing from these regions, to try and take a really robust and holistic approach to sustainability, including environmental concerns.
Thank you. And the question that is for you: what does it mean to be the coffee supplier at COP26?
Hopefully, I think for those drinking the coffee, a great cup of coffee. I think what it really means is for our coffee producers. I've been in touch with producers in Peru and Honduras this week, whose coffees were featuring at COP26. And it means an awful lot to those farmers. It means a huge amount to know that if you're a smallholder living in a 3-hectare plot in a rural and remote part of Peru, that your coffee has been drunk by Joe Biden. And that, these are farmers for whom sustainability is a matter of life and death, to be honest. And knowing that their positive actions are being amplified at COP through a cup of coffee is a really important thing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and certainly I get to know about Matthew algae in this session as well. So yeah, good for publicity. Another question for Subprosteria. Why did you decide to choose to rebalance your emissions? And I've got further elaborating questions, but if that makes sense to you in terms of a question, I think I can understand rebalancing your emissions.
I'm not quite sure what the rebalancing. So why did we decide to reduce our emissions? Well, clearly it's part of demonstrating part of the integrity. I've said before, we want to be able to say to our clients that we can help them move towards a greener planet. To do that, you've got to have the credibility that you're doing it yourself. I think one of the other big drivers for what we do, and that's speaking personally, but I think also on behalf of the people across the business, this is a subject that really matters to all of our employees as people. So not because they work for Subprosteria, but because it really matters to them as people, and it's something that they can connect to. They want to be part of a company that has these type of ambitions. So there is a groundswell of people across the business that really want to make this change. And I'm not sure whether that relates to the rebalancing question, but certainly to the reduction part of the question, that's very important.
Yeah, I think a common underlying theme that I did see across all the commitments and statements from each of your companies was around net zero. And what I'd really like to really question is around genuine zero solutions. So really not trying to go for offsets as the first option to reduce your emissions, really trying to see what you can do internally and trying to exhaust everything there, and then using offsets as a last port of call. If anyone has any pointers around how they've gone around that challenge within the companies, that would be really helpful.
Hi, Nish. One of the key things is using off-site prefabrication. It's a key thing because effectively what we're trying to do is change the methodology. So effectively, rather than having stores of labour on site building things from scratch on site, we take it off-site, build it in a factory, and bring in its component form. So that way we can vastly reduce, not just in terms of energy and carbon, you also there's other benefits in terms of less labour on site, so you get less folks travelling to site. You've got a better health and safety risk because you reduce the number of labour hours. So that's a key thing for us and what we do. We don't manufacture any primary products like air handling units and air conditioning units. We buy it in, but what we do is we assemble components and we can prefabricate these off-site in a much more higher quality, safer environment.
I think what's also important in the kind of reduction journey is to really understand what you have and to have a live picture of that. I think when it's a case of regulation asking you to report on your emissions once a year and you do it all in a big spreadsheet and you go around getting your hard copy utility bills and things like that, I don't think that's productive in terms of letting you understand your live energy uses or your live carbon emission sources. I think it's really good to have as up to date and as current reporting information as you possibly can, and then you can see the spikes and see where the real target areas are, rather than kind of going with a scattergun approach to try and tackle everything. You can see where your biggest emitters are and then be really focused in terms of your actions.
I guess what I was alluding to as the difference between net zero and genuine zero. So you've identified you've got X tons of emissions across your company, Scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. You then try and then reduce those emissions. And then you have targets to say, okay, we'll be net zero by 2020 X year. I really, from our perspective and our research, we really see that it really needs to be genuine zero by X year rather than net zero and relying on afforestation or offsetting projects, because there's just going to be a limited amount, the more companies that will have getting on board on this sustainability strategy. So does anyone have any views or opinions on this, on really coming up with targets that are genuine zero versus net zero targets?
So we've committed to generating zero emissions from our sites, our offices and our fleet by 2030. And what we decided to do was to offset all of our emissions from 2018. So we didn't consider offsetting our emissions to become carbon neutral as the end point. That was really the starting point. What we want to do is to continue to reduce what we actually emit down to zero, rather than just simply saying we've offset what we've generated and that's us finished. That's really the starting point for us rather than the end.
Excellent. Okay, that's really good to hear. Okay, I think we are coming close to the end of this session. I've got a small video to play, but before I go off, I would really like to just thank all the panelists that have joined us today, and One Carbon World to organize this event and inviting me as a moderator, and once again the audience that have been engaging with a number of questions. Unfortunately, we've not had the chance to go through all of them. So thank you all. Thank you to panelists. Thank you to the audience and the organizers. We'll go on to the short video and then we'll close it, wrap the session.
My name is Ali Abbas from Cinnabar Green. I'm the production manager here. We produce a range of natural products whilst keeping a keen eye on our carbon footprint and impact on the environment. We grow many of our ingredients ourselves and source others from local growers and suppliers. We are constantly working to make our distillation process more sustainable and efficient. We have recently experimented with partially drying the herbs, and the result of this is we use less fuel, have shorter distillation times and high yields. We make our fertilizers here organically, and the herbs we have distilled are taken back to the fields and incorporated into the soil. Our production system is entirely solar powered, and our products are made by hand. We have selected aluminium for our standard packaging as it is light and easily recyclable. Our focus is on the local market, where we provide a natural option for hotels, lodges and our retail customers. We are always looking for ways to lower our carbon emissions, improve our environmental impact, and help bring prosperity to our community as a route to a happier, greener world.
Karen Rose is a family business based in Kenya that's been growing and exporting flowers for over 30 years.
We play a vital role in the thriving community around us as part of the global supply chain, supplying quality cut flowers into retailers around the globe who share a vision of sustainability with us.
As a responsible company, since the beginning, we have led the way in achieving and maintaining the highest ethical, social, and environmental standards, as is evidenced by our global certifications.
But now, with the existential threat upon us, we are at a turning point for humanity.
When One Carbon World approached us with a grant to fund the measurement, verification, and offsetting of our emissions, we jumped at the opportunity.
Measurement is a key part of every part of our business. What you can't measure, you can't manage, or indeed talk about it.
And we have a lot to talk about.
We have a robust energy plan, including our solar farms, that powers our irrigation and coastals.
We harvest and store rainwater from our greenhouses to irrigate our flowers. We also use rail systems to transport flowers from field to packhouse, avoiding use of diesel.
We are also doing our part on carbon sequestration. We have set aside 25% of our gross area for biodiversity. Annually, we produce over 30,000 tree seedlings for our own use and also to distribute to the community as a way of encouraging reforestation.
We are proud of our carbon neutral international standard at enterprise level ROV certification.
Proud not only because it's the right thing for us to do for our collective future, but because it also gives us an opportunity to once again lead by example as a business and a force for good.
We only have a small contribution, but hope this will inspire others to follow in our footsteps.
We can't do this alone. Please join us.
Here at Believe Housing, we've had an environmental team for just 1 year, but we've made that year count. We were the first housing association to achieve the Carbon Neutral International Standard and the first to take part in Climate Neutral Now. Every level of the business supports us to make powerful and measurable changes. This month, we're electrifying 10% of our fleet vehicles. A project is underway to retrofit hundreds of our existing properties, and we're investigating how best to decarbonise all 18,000 of our customers' homes. We want our new builds fossil-free by 2025. We assess the environmental credentials of every business tendering for work with us, And the Royal College of Art students helped us to create better ways to engage local residents with environmental issues. But small changes can also make a big difference, like our new habitats for wildlife, our staff allotment, and our litter picking. Our foundations are in place to build a greener future.